Welcome into episode number 14 of the SEC Football Hour. I'm Chase Robinson. That is Chris Lee. As we're going to spend the next few minutes talking all things SEC football. We do this show each week in conjunction with all the prediction videos we put out, our power rankings that goes out on Monday, and everything we do to get you ready for Saturday. This is just something else we get to do. So we're excited about getting into this today. Coming up, we got a conversation with Andrew Monaco. He is the radio voice of the Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M getting ready to go on the road to Florida this weekend to play in the Swamp. We'll get his thoughts on that matchup and the team as a whole so far here in 2024. We'll also get to some likely and unlikely SEC fantasy football that Chris and I are doing. We'll check our score there from last week. We'll get into some what we learned in just a second. Before we go any farther, let's talk about our friends at Bet Online. They bring you all this great content. They are the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. If you think you know your stuff, you can get in on the $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, you can head over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker or one of the over 150 slots games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Chris Lee, we put a wrap on week 2 of the college football season. Let's talk about what we learned in week 2. What's something that stands out to you, Chris, of what you learned here in week 2?
I'm going to start with the bigger picture observation on college football, and I'll go into the SEC in a little bit. But I think there were 2 games that really caught my eye last weekend. Notre Dame losing at home to Northern Illinois. Nobody saw that one coming.
Yeah.
And I think the Oregon-Boise State game, I didn't watch it, but I think Oregon had to kick a field goal the last play of the game to beat Boise State in a game that may have playoff implications for both schools. And I just think, number one, in this era of the transfer portal and fitting things together, you just never know. There's some things that we predicted, like Georgia looks like Georgia's pretty good. But some things we didn't predict, especially after Notre Dame went to A&M last week and won a big game. I think the unpredictability of the season from week to week and the fact that, like, one interesting discussion has been, does this knock Notre Dame out of the playoff? And for the most part, the thought is that it didn't if Notre Dame can take care of business in other things. I kind of like the fact that we still have some national title implications in play for pretty much everybody without having one bad week. And you can debate whether that's right or wrong. But I think those are 2 things to me that are standing out early. And again, I think there's some implications for the SEC within that that we'll dive into. But I thought that, to me, was one of the most interesting storylines over college football in week 2.
Yeah, most definitely when a team like that goes down, for sure. Something I learned, I'm going to go team specific here, Chris, that Arkansas is better than I think we all thought. Now, I say that after they lose a game to Oklahoma State, but looking big picture at Arkansas, this offense looks totally different than what we saw last year. They're going to put up a lot of yards. They're going to put up points this year under Bobby Petrino with Talon Green. They need to learn how to finish games, but I think something I learned is Arkansas is a team I think some teams are going to have to watch out for this year.
Yeah, I've got that in my category also of things. And I've kind of divided this into maybe 5 categories of teams. And I'm going to call this maybe not what we've learned, because we haven't learned a whole lot yet in 2 weeks. I mean, if we want to start taking things to the bank, then give me a bankroll and a plane ticket to Vegas. But I'll tell you what I think, okay? And I'll let you go one by one and react to those. I think we have 6 playoff caliber teams in Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss as it stands right now. Now, Missouri hasn't played anybody of note. Ole Miss hasn't played anybody of note. You could have a big injury to a quarterback or something like that. But I think right now, as best we can call it, it feels, Chase, like we've got 6 playoff caliber teams. Thought we might have as many as 9 going into the season. I think I've kind of eliminated 3 of those that I'll get to in a little bit. But is that fair or unfair?
I think that's very fair. I think most definitely there's six that I could see, and obviously I know, we may not see six, but I think that definitely is possible.
Now, I've got two teams that I think right now are better than we thought. And you got into one of them a minute ago. That was Arkansas. And my goodness, how would Arkansas love to have that game back? I think what we wanted to know going into that game in Stillwater was, could Arkansas hang with Oklahoma State? Well, Arkansas could not only hang with Oklahoma State, but if it doesn't make some really bad mistakes, Arkansas's got an upset in one of the bigger wins of college football to this point. It would be ranked by now. I think that's one thing. And I think another team, and a lot of this was done in week one with its upset of Virginia Tech. But I think Vanderbilt, the way the Commodores handled
Yep.
business, not allowing Alcorn State past midfield, pitching a shutout, getting a special teams and a defensive touchdown, and Diego Pavia continuing to make plays and keep the clock moving for an offense that is not going to be one you're going to see every day. I think those are two teams in the category of better than we thought.
I would certainly agree with that. I mean, I think Vanderbilt is is almost a 180 from what we're used to and what we saw a year ago from the Commodores. And so, I would say those two teams are very good, very surprisingly good um, this year. That I'm excited to see what they can do. I think they have a high ceiling this year, both of them.
I'm going to give you another category of teams. And again, I've got them in five categories. I think because this is the SEC, we obsess about everything. It used to be day to day. Now that you've got Twitter and Facebook and social media and everybody can see every game, we obsess minute to minute.
Yeah,
And I think the SEC, I think it's the perfect motto. People make fun of it, but I think it just means more. I mean,
yeah,
does anything encapsulate the SEC for better or worse than that motto? I think it's perfect for what the
it
league
is.
is.
Yes.
And what you see in place is everybody's got expectations, right? I mean, you probably had 11 or 12 programs, realistic or not, coming into the season thinking we need to be playoff contenders. And when you don't hit that standard, it can go off the rails for you quickly. Now, I've got five teams that I've got on this could go off the rails watch. And some of these for different reasons, and I will unpack them one by one. Auburn got beat by Cal and they lost it. Nobody saw coming.
At home.
Got beat at home in a way that unpacked every single concern Auburn fans had about this team. And it all starts with quarterback play. And you saw Peyton Thorne talking about how he's getting messages from gamblers asking for money back on bets. I mean, that is the pressure cooker that you are in at Auburn for a number of reasons, not the least of which is you are right down the road from what has probably been historically the best program in college football. And we know how that rivalry goes and shapes things. Alabama's 2-0. That's not going to make things any easier for Auburn. That is number one on my going off the rails watch. Number two, Florida, for reasons that we've unpacked many times. No, they got that reprieve last week with beating Sanford. They've got a little bit of excitement with DJ Lagway, so I would put Auburn behind Florida at this point because you can always sell future excitement. And that might be one way Florida's got to get off this going off the rails watch. Now, I think the schedule could hammer that either way. You could feel great about DJ Lagway and still take some losses with that schedule. But that's number two. Number three, I think you got to go Kentucky, Chase. They just look so bad on offense. And I had two teams that I thought I was really higher on than everybody else. And I had my reasons lined up. I'd done my research, and I'll get to one of those teams later. But Kentucky, and I think you've got a recurring theme in Lexington. You've got offensive instability year in and year out. They've always got a different coordinator. They have underachieved, I would say, on offense last year. Devin Leary didn't get it done. Brock Vandagriff this year. Maybe it's not fair to start pointing fingers at him yet. I'm not going to go there yet. But when you get sacked more times than you've got completions, and that probably points to offensive line, We talked all off season about how good we thought that 3-man starting receiving core was. But I think that the injuries at running back have probably not helped. Losing Ray Davis was a big loss. And I think you're going to have a lot of questions about Kentucky because this has been a program that cannot develop good offenses year in and year out. And losing by 25 in your SEC opener home is not the way you wanted to start because that schedule ahead, it gets tough pretty quickly.
Yeah, I feel like with Kentucky every year it's a hyped up quarterback and they just haven't
Mm-hmm.
lived up to that. They there's no continuity in a quarterback at Kentucky. It's a new guy every year, like you mentioned. It's new coordinators. It's a whole lot of new every year. And so I feel like there's no continuity. And I feel like that's a problem for Kentucky that they need to address, that they need to fix. Get a guy in there who's going to be there for a couple of years and let's build this offense. But yeah, again, not to point fingers at Brock Vandagriff. He may turn around and have a great year. Still early in the year, but yeah, I just feel like there's not a lot of consistency and continuity there at Kentucky.
Yeah. And number 4 on going off the rails watch is LSU. And injuries have started to really hit the Tigers. You had the John Emery injury. You had the Jacobian Guillory injury.
Yep.
We were wondering, we had questions about LSU on the defensive line. And boy, losing your best guy there's you've heard this probably as you've listened to talk shows and podcasts. There's that whole if Brian Kelly goes 7-5, he's not going to be retained. I'm not vouching for the credibility of that either way, although that seems like a reasonable implication at LSU, given how quickly they have moved on from coaches before. And you look down that schedule, they've already got one loss. They could take another one this week. I think Ole Miss will be a loss. Arkansas could be a loss. Even Vandy or Oklahoma could be losses at home, depending on how dialed in this team is or is not at the end of the year. So I think that's one where you're already hearing talk of Brian Kelly being let go if bad things happen. And the injuries and the defensive play have gotten me a little bit concerned.
I would agree with that. Yeah, the injuries could prove to be an issue, and I think we'll find out more this week watching them play. What exactly they look like? How are they going to fix this? But yeah, I would completely agree with you. I think there are issues. I'm not sure that they know how to fix them honestly at this point. And again, I know it's early in the season, but has LSU been in this position
Yeah.
before and been able to fix it on the fly and make something magical happen? Not that I remember. And so this is new
Yeah.
territory. I feel like for them, yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, category number 4. This is one team. This is rebuild mode. That's Mississippi State. We wanted to know, how did State handle a trip to Arizona State? Well, State was down 30-3 at half. Made a nice comeback in the second half, which I think speaks to coaching and motivation. But in the end, even when Arizona State was not scoring points, Chase Robinson, it was able to run the ball with Cam Scattleboo.
Yep.
State could not stop it. Front 7 getting blown off the ball. That was our question. Do they have enough defensive talent? We thought that he would get some answers on the offense, the way he attacked the portal at quarterback and receiver and tight end. He did some good things there, but you've only got, let's put it bluntly, so much cash to spend at a place like
Yep.
State where your NIL war chest is probably not equivalent to a lot of other teams, mostly of the teams around the conference. There's only so much you can do. You're already in a rebuild, 3 coaches in 3 years. And that one to me was a game where they need to win this if they are going to get bowl contention. And I just think the schedule, which is going to get tougher as the season goes on. To me, when I watch them, the way their front 7 got blown off the ball, that is a program that is in rebuild mode.
It is, yeah, and we'll see what they figure out and how they do that. We weren't expecting them to be a playoff contender this year. I think that we were just facing the facts there, but I think there's still a lot to learn about this team. How do they respond to this past weekend and that long road trip and that loss? What do they do moving forward? I think those are the questions I'm looking for, just as they continue just 2 games into the year.
All right, my 5th category of teams, and if you've done the math, we're down to 2 teams, and this is like, man, I don't know. Leading off the man I don't know category is Texas A&M, because last week that loss to Notre Dame in week 1 was explainable. And then Notre Dame loses to Northern Illinois. And I know it's a different game every week, but that couldn't have made you feel any better. The offense was better last week, but it's against McNeese State. I'm not going to completely sell out on the Aggies yet. You do see some teams lose a game week 1 or week 2, and they're better, but I just don't know. And we'll wait and see. I don't think they're a playoff caliber team, but I just don't know, Chase.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's still a lot to figure out about this team, and I think the Florida game will expose some of that this weekend. Can they go on the road in a tough environment and win this game? Which, yeah, I think it's very winnable for A&M. It's bizarre almost. Following that Notre Dame game again, like you mentioned, this McNeese, not to discredit them, but that's a winnable game for A&M. So yeah, it's bizarre. It's I thought the defense was going to be better than that. I still really like the defensive front at A&M. I just thought they were going to be. I thought we would see more of them against Notre Dame, and do some big things. So I think again we'll find out more, and I think we'll learn more about A&M this weekend.
All right, my last, I don't know, team is South Carolina, and I try not to react too quickly to things, good or bad. I try to look at the underlying fundamentals of the team. And on the bright side, okay, South Carolina just had the best win that maybe anybody in the league scored last week, with an utter domination of Kentucky in Kentucky's park. On the other hand, for whatever reason, Carolina's always had Kentucky's number. So was this a one-off? I don't know. Then on the other hand, there's that defense. They're getting a pass rush. That makes things awfully difficult for opponents. And we thought their defense might be a little bit underrated coming into the year. I think now it seems like we've got more evidence that that's the case. On the other hand, it is an era of college football where you got to move the ball.
Yep.
And they still have not lit up the stat sheet. They are still not doing, Rocket Sanders is not the Rocket Sanders we saw 2 years ago. Was better last week when North Sellers, still a young kid, made some improvements. Can Carolina thread a needle and be very mediocre offensively and really good defensively and opportunistic and have a good, maybe great year? Yeah, we've seen that before. But that is a very narrow space to try to thread. And so that is why I'm still in the category of, man, I just don't know. And if you listen to our predictions video on that LSU game this weekend, you heard some of that uncertainty in my analysis.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to have to again, we've seen them 2 weeks. We're going to have to see more to figure out the South Carolina team. But I do know that they're if they want to kind of get out of this category that we've put them in of we don't know, they're going to have to be consistent. I think that's what has lacked in Shane Beamer teams in the past. We remember 22. He had those 2 big wins in November. Before that, it was up and down. Last year, they were in a position where they had to win out their last 5 games to get a bowl game. And inconsistency almost cost them a game to Jacksonville State in their first win in their first year as an FBS team. They weren't able to beat Clemson, so they didn't make a bowl game. It's just the inconsistencies, I feel like, is what has plagued South Carolina under Shane Beamer. If they come out, if Lenore Sellers can consistently play good, if their defense can consistently do what they did on Saturday at Kroger Field in Lexington, Kentucky, then yeah, we're going to be having a different conversation in the coming weeks about South Carolina. They've been so inconsistent. I'm not going to hang my hat on them yet because I don't know what we're going to see this week against LSU or their opponent next week. There's been no consistency under Shane Beamer. That's what we learned in this week 2 of college football season here in the SEC. Let's move over to our SEC fantasy football now. As if you haven't watched us the last couple of episodes, this is the week before the season, we had a draft where we drafted some SEC players for some fantasy football, and we're going to keep up with this every week. Chris won last week. We'll see how it played out this week. So let's take a look here at our fantasy football, and Chris, I'll let you walk us through this.
Well, let's go through yours first, Chase, and I'll just have you walk us through it? I think we both got bit by some players this week, and that
Yeah.
certainly applied to you too.
Yeah, so I got Jalen Milroe as my quarterback, of course, against South Florida on Saturday. He did throw for a couple of touchdowns, and had a decent game, I would say. And then his running back Justice Haynes, um, did fair. You know, Alabama struggled running the ball at times against South Florida, but you know, it's okay for those two guys. I went Jarquez Hunter as a running back, and he did not get a lot of touches in the second half of that game. They started off running the ball a good bit. He finished with 68 yards. He did get 11 yards receiving, but yeah, he just, and I don't know why they went away from running the ball, but they did. Deion Burks is another guy that, again, just he had such a great game in their opener against Temple. This Houston game was completely different, and Houston really stopped them. I did put Brew McCoy in this week. I took Jordan Watkins out, Brew McCoy in that wide receiver spot, and he did not do exactly what I was hoping he would do against North Carolina State. And then I got Caden Prieskorn in as my tight end there, and he had 48-yard receiving. I'm pleased with my defense, Texas. They did great against Michigan in the Big House, so I am definitely happy that I went with the Longhorns of my defense.
Yeah, I think you caught some tough breaks this week.
Yeah,
I said last week I think Deion Burks was going to turn out to be a terrific pick. They just got so many injuries, and that
yeah,
offense is with the offensive line injuries dysfunctional. Hunter, I thought you caught a bad break too. I thought, man, he is primed for a big year because they look like they might have figured out how to throw the ball a little bit. Certainly did in week one. Cal's defense was not great last week. I thought this was a Jarquez Hunter special. Like if you'd
yeah,
said he rushes for 150 and 2 TDs and catches 20 yards of passes, I'd have bought it. That is not the way it went down. You got a little unlucky. Ole Miss scored a lot of points. Prieskorn was not part of the touchdown celebrations. And Milroe, pretty solid game, 4 touchdowns total. You'd like to see maybe some more passing yards, and I think the sacks affected his rushing total. So, not a it was a week where I think your execution of your lineup was very defensible. It just didn't work
yeah,
out the way you hoped.
yeah. It
So
did not. Yes.
you had 130 coming in last week. I had a small glitch on our scoring last week. So you're at 201. And let me tell you, I did not have good thoughts about this week around noon Saturday. You saw me text you. I said,
Yeah.
man, I should have stuck. I was thinking I need to get Sawchuck out of my lineup, and I need to get in Jaquindon Jackson, who's over there sitting on my bench for Arkansas, not Oklahoma. So we'll switch that just for clarity's sake. And I didn't do it. And boy, Jaxson went off. Had 3 touchdowns, 150 yards rushing, something like that. And Sawchuck had 4 for 4. So I felt really stupid about that because I meant to do it, but I didn't. And we can only go on what we did. And I did not pull him from my lineup. That's my fault. But let me tell you, Chase, the Ole Miss Rebels have bailed me out this year between Trey Harris and Jaxson Dart. My concern a little bit was, do you lose out on some garbage time stats because Ole Miss is just beating the tar out of people? Well, no, it turns out this is the best of both worlds for Ole Miss. You get the benefit of beating bad teams, and your stars apparently get the benefit of being able to stay in and rack up stats. I got big games from Trey Harris and Jaxson Dart. Luther Burden, I think, got hurt, was just ordinary. Dylan Sampson also bailed me out. That's another team in the category of we're going to let our guys ball out and accumulate some stats. And Chase, not my best day, but at the end of the day, I got a victory in week 2, and I'm leading you by 30-something points in the overall standings.
Yeah. Me and my team are gonna have to figure something out here. Of course, I did have some pretty bland games with some of the guys on my team, but yeah, that was your guys executed this week. That is for sure. And going with Jaxson Dart was big, I think, Chris, for you.
Yeah, that really, really helped. He covers a lot of stupid managerial decisions elsewhere.
So that is our fantasy football for this week as Chris once again leads.
Well, Chase, we can also blame bad fantasy football lineup decisions on a lack of clarity. I mean, I had my kid had a baseball practice that morning. I'm trying to watch games on my phone in the bleachers. And you know what? I bet if I'd popped a MagicMind Saturday morning, I remembered to make some switches in my lineup. Just the day was overwhelming, and nothing is great about giving you mental clarity like MagicMind. I tried it this spring. It is a mental performance shot that keeps you clear and motivated and reduces stress. It has helped me gain a clear head and much needed focus through some stressful and hectic days this spring and summer. It's not a coffee replacement. There's no quick fixes, but it's an addition to your morning routine with time release caffeine. If you want the scientific explanations for why this works, it is completely safe with all 12 natural ingredients to support your body's energy engine. It's got mushroom nootropics and adaptogens, plus over 100% of your daily vitamin C and D in every bottle. It has been doctor validated with over 200 scientific studies behind every ingredient. MagicMind donates 5 cents of every bottle sold to mental health charities that help U.S. homeless communities. It is so confident that it can help you, that it will refund your money 100%, no questions asked. If you don't like it, check out MagicMind. You got 2 options. Number one, you can get 48% off a subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase. Use that promo code Southeastern20. We will have the link in the episode description on both podcasts and YouTube, so you can go there. Just drop in that promo code Southeastern20 and try some MagicMind, where flow state awaits you.
I'll tell you one team that's going to be looking for some clarity, and that is the Texas A&M Aggies. I had a chance to catch up earlier this week with the radio voice of the Aggies, Andrew Monaco. Great conversation, and I want you to check out right now. Here is the voice of the Aggies, Andrew Monaco. And we're going to talk a little Texas A&M Aggie football now. The Aggies will begin SEC play in the Swamp this weekend against the Florida Gators. Andrew Monaco, he is the voice of the Texas A&M Aggies on the radio broadcast. Really appreciate you coming on and talking some A&M football with us today.
Howdy, Chase. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so like I mentioned, SEC play begins this week. But before we get into football, I'm just curious. First year under Mike Elko, if there's any culture differences that are really noticeable at the program. I know you're close to the program, doing all the games and everything. What would you say are some differences maybe this year as far as culture things under Coach Elko?
Chase, I think the thing that jumps out is accountability. I think that was what Mike wanted to set up from day one. So when a certain transfer was late for a meeting, guess what? That door was locked. They weren't going to wait for that person. That started very early for that. I love the other thing, and not that it was bad in the past. I think the hiring of Tommy Moffitt from LSU as a strength coach has already paid dividends for a couple of players. Le'Veon Moss has already mentioned he feels like he's in the best shape of his life. You want to be a bellwether back, you've got to be in shape to be able to do that. And those are just a couple of things that jump out. I think what helps Mike is the familiarity with Texas A&M and knowing that, but this is his program. But I think the defensive players who played under him before he left for Duke understand what was needed. I think some of those recruits have an idea because he would talk to them about it, and now the entire team does it or understands what he wants. And that's for the entire staff. Chase, I know after Notre Dame, he talked about how, we can't point fingers at one another. And he thought that was a little bit of a problem in the past. He said the first thing you have to do is go look in the mirror. What could you have done better? How could we have coached better? How could you have played better? How could you as a staff prepared? I think that's it. I would have to say accountability might be number one on that list.
Yeah, that's good for A&M. You mentioned the Notre Dame game. Big win against McNeese this past week, but you start the season off at home and in a game that, it was one of the most exciting of that opening day of college football was Notre Dame coming to Texas A&M. Just from your perspective, calling the game just and how it played out, just give me your thoughts on that opener there against Notre Dame.
Electric atmosphere. Absolutely. I don't know if there's a better way to start a season than having number 7 come in and it being Notre Dame, and knowing that this was on the schedule for a while and then it finally is here. You know how it is. You see all the home and homes that you have down the line, and we knew Notre Dame was coming. And 24 and 25 is when that series starts. Just fascinating. And with the new start of an era, was great. The game seemed to be played in a phone booth, Chase. I mean, it was physical for week one. It's the dangers of week one because you have to do every adjustment. Everything's new. With the transfer portal, I can just imagine what preparation was like for each coaching staff. That for A&M, you've got to find out not just that where Bo Collins played at Clemson. You had to know what Mike Denbrock did at LSU. You had, then you had the storylines of Riley Leonard being Mike Elko's quarterback at Duke. I just think it's a great, and I love it for college. I don't know if coaches will agree, but I love it for college football fans. I love that first weekend, if you will, not including week 0, having those marquee games. And as you know, they're not always played on campus. Sometimes they're on neutral site, which adds its own excitement as well. It's almost like a first week bowl game. This one being on campus was a lot of fun. And some of the other storylines, they ran out to power. It was the best kept secret at A&M. And in this day and age of social media, they're not always kept. Secrets aren't always kept. So I like the throwback to the white helmets that you had seen from A&M in the past. To me, it's a lot of things of why we say that Mike Elko gets Texas A&M. Now, he didn't get the win, but as he said, if this was just a 1-week build, then of course you come up short. But he's building a program, and I thought it was a really good start for A&M. But I'm telling you, it was electric, and I think football is going to benefit from that. I think all the sports on campus are going to benefit because there were so many recruits who were there and in that atmosphere on that Saturday nights.
Yeah, and I want to get into the team and everything, but I do have to. I've never been to a game at Texas A&M. That's on my list of places I want to go watch a college football game. But for those of us who have not been to Kyle Field for a football game, take us through what that experience is like.
Where do you start? I guess at midnight, right? Midnight yell practice is where you start. And Chase, there were 45,000 people at midnight yell practice. And when you realize that a student section, it's 38,000 students will be at Kyle Field on the Saturday night, as opposed to the Friday night at midnight. You realize that's bigger than some stadiums. And that is special. Everyone together for that game day special, obviously seeing the tailgating, and everybody has the tailgating. I think it's the combination then of Spirit Walk by the players. I think it's when the core steps off and they walk throughout campus, that's still being an integral part of Texas A&M. And what I love about Kyle Field is, not that I'm discounting game ops, you don't have to tell the 12th man that it's third down on defense. They know it. You'll hear that there's a buzz. There's that they yell. You can just hear that throughout, and then it rises. From my first game there, where my partner Dave Elmendorf asked me if I felt it, it actually does sway, and it was swaying against Notre Dame. What I thought was really special was that place was full very early, and they were into it, whether it was the towels that they were waving and so much anticipation and that buzz. And then what I think, obviously, your new players, whether they're freshmen or transfers, understand, okay, this is what I signed up for, and you realize, okay, this is why I came to Texas A&M. What I think is then the reality really hits is almost 95,000 are there last Saturday at 11:45 for McNeese. That's when you realize, man, you got to understand who you're playing for there. And the same thing, that game day is something special. I missed it. You know what I mean? Like, I miss it. You don't do it since December. You're coming off a baseball run and you're in Omaha, and that is special on its own. And Olsen Field at Bluebell Park was special throughout that run. And then a short off season, which is great because that means baseball did very well. But you forget why it's so special on that Saturday. I truly believe this, Chase, and it's not the only one in the country. I think Kyle Field is a bucket list type stadium for a college football fan. There are a lot on my list, some that I have been able to see, some that I haven't, some that have been flat out gems. I think Kyle Field, if you are a football fan, you need to take in a Texas A&M home game.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely try to get out there one day for a Texas A&M game. Talking about this year's team, Connor Wegman, at quarterback, battled the injury a year ago. He's back. How would you say how would you kind of put into words the start for his season?
Yeah, disappointing against Notre Dame and here's the thing, by getting injured in week 4 against Auburn, you missed the rest of the 8 games of that season to get all those throws, and understand that maybe, and it was footwork in week 1 against Notre Dame, and it was very un-Connor Wigman like that. That's what I think stood out more than anything else. He's a baseball player, right? As he talked about the next pitch, but it was more than just, okay, we're going to go out there on Saturday against McNeese and it's all going to fix itself. He was going to fix it. And that's what he saw on Sunday when he saw the film. And that's what Colin Klein had seen. And they weren't in the same room. They noticed the same thing. And he went right to work. There's a diligence to him. There's a leader in him that I really think happened in this offseason. Like, I think obviously he missed it. He missed the game. He missed that camaraderie, but he knew, and he had a chance to leave, but Mike Elko had an awful lot of trust and he had to battle for that. It wasn't like he was assumed to be, well, you may have assumed he was going to be number 1, but he was going to have to win that job, and he did. And I say he's got the it factor, but he didn't have it against Notre Dame. And how do you figure that out? And he realized it was my feet. Now I know it's McNeese, I get it, but the throws look like what Connor had done in the past. His very first game was in relief of Haynes King at South Carolina 2 years ago. And he's thrust in the fourth quarter of that one. But then his first game being against Ole Miss, getting that start. And that's what you saw. You saw the release. You saw the quick release. I thought, this may be unfair, I thought he looked unsure against Notre Dame. And I thought he got antsy. And to me, I don't know if that was the injury or if it was, and when I say between the ears, knowing that, how is my offensive line? Now I think he can learn to trust that offensive line. I thought he was very quick and he wasn't going through progressions. I thought he did against McNeese. Look, the test is Florida on Saturday. It's not against the Cowboys. No offense to McNeese. But he had to get that right, because if he struggled, then you were looking at, boy, there's a deeper issue here. And Mike Elko thought, you know what, maybe it was hearing all offseason, boy, is the offensive line going to be any good? Wow, Notre Dame's defensive line's really good. He was antsy and he seemed to rush. He looked way more comfortable. I love the quick release for him. I work with Dave Elmendorf, who's a safety, and he says that difference in the quick release is the difference between you getting a hand on that ball and an incompletion and it's complete. And then when you watch the receivers and someone like a Cyrus Allen who comes from Louisiana Tech, instead of waiting for that ball to come into your body, using those hands, like, that's quicker. Will that be the difference, that release, the difference between a completion or a turn and run or an incompletion? That's what was good to see against McNeese, and for 2 quarters, and you had to get some other players in. But I just think there's something about him. He loves the game. He loves to play. He loves to lead. He loves the responsibility. He got on up at that podium and said, these are the faults. Point blank, period. I didn't do this. It takes a lot to say that as opposed to escaping from that. And I think he's got not just that ability, I think he's got the confidence in his teammates as well.
Looking at the running back room, obviously Reuben Owens was a tough loss to start this season. You hate to see a guy go out before the season even starts, but I've been impressed with Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels. Those are 2 guys who, when you coming in, were going to be great backs for A&M. What do you make of the skill guys that Wigman has around him?
I think you have not just experience, I think you have some maturity as well back there with both Moss, Daniels, and I'll even throw in E.J. Smith, who was at Stanford, whom his head coach, David Shaw, said was a complete back. And I think that's the growth of Amari Daniels, is more of a complete back. You always knew what he could do with the ball in his hands. What was he going to do without the ball in his hands? And Mike Elko just raved this week about the pass protection, a couple times picking up the blitzers there. Le'Veon Moss, the same thing. Complete backs. And in a Colin Klein offense, you're going to need to be a receiver. in anybody's offense. And I think fans need to understand this. The reason why you're going to get carries or not get carries is what else are you going to do when you're on that field? So you've got to pass protect, you've got to block, you got to run the right routes, right? You got to hit the holes when they're there for your that your offensive line is giving you. I'm not sure there's a bellwether back, but I like what each of those running backs bring. I think Le'Veon Moss runs hard, and I thought he did that both weeks so far. And he really gave all the credit to Tommy Moffitt, the strength coach. I don't think he was in as good. I think he thought he was in good shape and now realizes what good shape is. And I think he can feel the difference. And for an athlete, that absolutely gives you more confidence.
Yep.
Chase, I call it all the work in the dark. And to me, workouts are work in the dark. Mike Elko said this: not a single lift was missed by this team. Not a single one.
Wow.
Where does that pay off? Sometimes week one, could be later, but it shows that solidarity and what they took in and how much it meant to them. But Le'Veon felt it already has paid off for him. And again, I just think that's the confidence. I don't think, again, there's not a marquee guy on there, but I think it is a very solid running back stable. And that's what Troop, as they call him, the running backs coach, Trooper Taylor, who Mike brings from Duke. They truly believe it is a stable, and they're competitive with one another, complementary of one another, different skills. So they're going to do it by committee, and I think Mike Elko is happy with that committee.
And I know we'll learn much more about the team this week against Florida and in weeks to come. But on the defensive side, that's Mike Elko's side. Obviously, he was a defensive coordinator there. He's a great defensive mind. What do you make of this Texas A&M defense so far?
Yeah, that defensive line is stout. I think bringing Nick Scorton in from Purdue is a big, big addition. And he's from this area, Bryan High School, and back home, if you will. I also think one of the keys for this defense is the returning players. And I think Shamar Turner is one of those guys. He was tempted by the NFL. I think staying an extra year is not only going to be beneficial for A&M, but also for Shamar Turner. And he's going to have that, I call the DeMarvin Leal, who's now with the Steelers, a little inside, a little outside. That versatility, I think, will help him next level and to understand both positions. Cassius Howe coming from Bowling Green, I think, is a big one. They love this kid, Rylan Kennedy, who has been fantastic on third down. Young kid. And sometimes some of the more exciting players are the ones who it all comes together as freshmen. And then when they realize, okay, I had my first year under my belt, they blossom. Same thing with redshirt guys. Like they blossom that next year because everything starts to click. Very athletic, I think, on those edges. Shamar Stewart is another one. Very athletic on those edges, which is big. And I think one of the keys for Texas A&M has always been the interior as well. And with DJ Hicks staying, Albert Regis, Rodas Johnson coming from Wisconsin, you have guys who have played snaps on the collegiate level. I equate it to baseball. I don't care where you've played, but you've seen the shapes of pitches. And the more that you see, the more you can identify quickly. I think it's the same thing for a lot of these transfers they have played. The sacks aren't there. The quarterback hurries are there. They've disrupted. And they disrupted Riley Leonard a little bit in week number 1 and more last week. The 2 interceptions were because they hurried the quarterback there. But a defensive line is absolutely going to set the tone for Texas A&M. Love the linebackers. Torian York, terrific captain once again. And I like who he has with him. Damian Sanford is another one of those freshmen becoming a sophomore. Scooby Williams, who has played at Florida, SEC back. Solomon DeShields, a Pitt linebacker. You play for Pat Narduzzi on that defense. You got to be good. And what was fun against McNeese was seeing 2 freshmen get valuable game time because you can't replicate. You can't practice it. You got to go through it. And Tristan Jernigan and Jordan Lockhart are a couple that's going to be valuable, and you don't know when you're going to need them. They shored up the back end, and it was needed. And it wasn't so much because of injury or last year they struggled. The injuries that hit them, they were very inexperienced back there. Good, talented freshmen that I remember Jimbo saying, I'd like to play them 20 to 25 snaps, but they were forced to play 50 snaps. Chase, you know, from snap 26 to 50 is when young players get in trouble, right?
Yep.
It's too much. And you wish you could ease them in. You can't ease a cornerback in against Ole Miss. You can't ease a cornerback in against LSU. Baptism by fire. But I think it helped guys like, you got Javon Thomas now on a corner with Will Lee III, who played at Kansas State. But Javon got that valuable experience where just he's there, but just didn't make the play against Jaden Daniels and LSU, and just didn't make the play against Jaxson Dart. Now he's made the play and he's won that cornerback position. And Tyreek Chappelle now at a nickel, and Bryce Anderson moving to safety. I just think it's all valuable in that experience. So much for a Mike Elko defense. And I need to be fair, it's Jay Bateman who's the DC, but Mike's hands are going to be all over this, is what's between the ears. And that's from his former players, Chase, who all talk about Mike. They got more comfortable, and it went from top down to now talking with. And I remember in the early going, Mike was doing all the talking. And then after a couple years, Damani Richardson could sit in that backfield and talk with Mike and tell him what he's seeing. And Leon O'Neal Jr. could do that. And Antonio Johnson could do that when Mike was still here. When they get to that, very similar to what Notre Dame has under Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, when they get there, and that's where A&M was before Mike left, I think this makes this defense even more dangerous. And I asked Mike, can you get there a little quicker with the personnel? Like every coach, he goes, I hope so, but I think they have the type of players that can get there quickly. Will it be week 3? Don't know, but it's going to have to be very good against the Gators.
Yeah, it will. And speaking of Florida, on the road this Saturday for this SEC matchup, first one for each team for the season. Just in the prep you've done so far for Florida, what do you know about the Gators? Kind of what are the challenges going to be for A&M?
Between Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway, who the Aggies were really in on for DJ Lagway, is from Willis, Texas, and he's been around the program, and a lot of players know him, and he was terrific against Samford. But Graham Mertz, the same thing. You're going to take snaps at Wisconsin? Yeah, that's what you want to do. And you've got to prepare for both, because I don't think it matters who they play. I think we're going to see both. I think there's going to be packages for DJ Lagway, and I think it's a matter of what Mike was saying this week. You have to be prepared. You can't prepare along the lines of you can't install this for Mertz, all of this for Lagway, and have 2 preparations. It's too much. It's overload. So what you do is say, okay, if he's in, this is what we're, you're prepared. Mike seemed to think it's almost like week 1, where you've got to adjust a lot quicker for something like this. Got to know tendencies. Will this situation arise? And that's when you look and see, okay, what does a Billy Napier do in the past on offense for things like that? Loves the backs. The other thing he brought up, and I really don't think this is a shot at the ACC, but he knows this is an SEC offense and an SEC defense. And, those are 2 different things when you're comparing things with conferences. He thinks the D-line of Florida will rotate a lot of players, which he likes to do as well, keep them fresh. He thinks a guy like Shamar James is an impact linebacker. He loves their back end. And it's always because he's a safety guy, right? So he's going to look at the back end and see how that is. He thinks they have playmakers. And Chase, I think that's what it is week in and week out in the SEC, that you may be known for offense, but an SEC defense, is going to be that caliber. Florida's that way also. And it's more than just, see, this is where I'm probably going to get myself in trouble. The reason why stadiums and going on the road is difficult isn't the fans. It's the talent on the field that makes it hard. Yeah. It's not like Alabama's the most intimidating place. It's intimidating. Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Patrick Surtain. That's intimidating on defense. You know what I mean? Like, you love the atmospheres, but when you have the talent to go with it, that's when it's impressive. That's what Florida has. Very much like A&M. I thought Florida probably was a little more disappointing. The expectations coming in, and that's what Florida is dealing with, expectations. And that's hard because that's external. Your program has to be internal. That's all that matters. But They're dealing with expectations. You're starting off with a rivalry game against Miami, which is a better team than they were last year. And then everyone's saying, yeah, but it was Samford, right? So A&M, the disappointment of losing to Notre Dame, but yeah, it was McNeese. Week 3 becomes important for Billy Napier, who's been there 3 years, the third week of Mike Elko, to make sure that you're on the right path. Where Mike has the advantage is he's still building his program, where the seat's a little hotter for Billy Napier. Fair or unfair, like I said, we all have to speak to it, sometimes a narrative that's outside of our programs. That isn't always fair, but it's the reality of where we are. But Florida, just talent. The Gators are always going to have speed. You can't play in the state of Florida and not have speed. I think that's the game changer for Florida schools. If you don't have speed, you didn't recruit well, and you just can recruit anywhere in that state. South Florida always has the speed. They're special down there. That North Florida, depending on the area, there's a whole lot of toughness in that Milton area, right? Felipe Franks was one of those guys from up in that area. Pensacola, Emmett Smith, you do that. The Tampa area, Jacksonville is loaded. Having been there 16 years working in Orlando, really came to appreciate that state and football. Then coming to Texas, you appreciate the football in this state as well. But heck, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Even that east and west part of Pennsylvania, from special places and some special talents in each of those states.
2:30 Central kickoff for Texas A&M at Florida. For those wanting to listen to the radio broadcast, what time do y'all go on? How can folks listen there to the?
We will go
radio
at 1:30. 12th Man mobile app is one way. That is the Texas A&M Athletics app. 12th Man mobile app. Learfield's Varsity Network app as well. If you would like to stream or try to find one of our 60 affiliates throughout the state of Texas. That's how we used to do it, Chase. We had to try to dial it in. Streaming's made it way easier to listen to all our friends now doing games. Of course, that also allows me to text them in the middle of games, and I'm not sure they always want to read my text because it usually means my game is done and I'm propped up with a beverage or something, sending out that text.
Andrew Monaco, voice of the Texas A&M Aggies. Andrew, really appreciate you taking some time with us. Enjoyed talking to you, and best of luck this weekend, but appreciate your time today.
Chase, thank you so much.
That was the voice of the Texas A&M Aggies, Andrew Monaco. Appreciate his time earlier this week to talk some Aggie football with us as they get ready to head to the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators. All right, Chris, let's dive into some likely or unlikely here in our final segment of episode number 14. I'll let you go first. What is the scenario you want to throw out there?
Okay, I talked about mystery teams and not knowing what to do with them. So I'm just going to put you on the spot and see what you think. South Carolina wins 7 regular season games. The Gamecocks are 2-0. That means they need to win 5 out of their final 10 to get there. And if you need it, I'm happy to read you the schedule ahead.
I've got it pulled up here. All right. So we got LSU. I'm going to say a win against LSU, a win against Akron. That's 2. Lost to Ole Miss. Lost to Alabama. I'm going to go win against Oklahoma. Win against A&M. Win at Vanderbilt. That Missouri one's tough. They'll get the win over Wofford. And Clemson's tough too. I'm going to say
Are you already at 7?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 7. Yeah.
I think that might be that might be the toughest question on the board in terms of win-loss expectation at this point of the season.
Yeah. That was tough. And some of those in there, like, I have no idea. The Oklahoma game, that's to me right now, and a lot can change. But right now, that's a toss-up to me. Texas A&M, still figuring them out. Missouri, we'll see where they're at that point. Like, yeah, that's tough, Chris. That is
I think part of the variability is like it's not only we don't know what to make of Carolina yet definitively, but like we don't know what to make of LSU. The injury's going to kill them. Arkansas looks, well, I guess Arkansas is not on the schedule. Excuse me. Oklahoma, we have issues, but Oklahoma's at the point where they could get some healthier guys back and gel. That's October 19th. A&M, we don't know. Vanderbilt, better than we thought. Clemson, you saw what happened last time Carolina went to Clemson. I think it's a fascinating question. I think their over-under for wins is maybe got more variability than any other team in the league at this point.
I think so too, and it is hard to gauge really at this point. So that was a good scenario. All right, Chris, likely or unlikely? And I've got a little. I'm going to add something to the end of this to help you think about it. Tennessee will be favored in the rest of their games, and I say that because Georgia, when Tennessee and Georgia play on November the 16th, Georgia will have already played Alabama and Texas. So, likely or unlikely, Tennessee will be favored in the rest of their games.
No, they're not going to be favored against Georgia. The model I've got, I think, has got Georgia 15, 16 points, including the home field advantage. I just don't see the swings between both teams being that dramatic. Georgia would probably have to fall 10 points in my model for that to be contested. But I thought the question you were going to ask me is, are they going to be favored in 11 of 12? Because that I can buy. Yeah. I think that Alabama game, by the point they get to it, it's going to be almost a toss-up on a neutral field, and it's not on a neutral field. It's in Knoxville, and we know what happened the last time those two teams played in Knoxville.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I'm interested, though, if Georgia was to drop either the Alabama or Texas game, where that would put that.
Well, I mean, there's drop, and like if they get obliterated by both teams, then maybe we can have a conversation. But I mean, let's face it. I don't think I think if Georgia loses those games, maybe by a field goal or a touchdown, I don't think that's going to significantly shock the world and it change the way we think about Georgia. Look, we said all off season, Georgia's going to be favored in every game. But can we see them losing a game or two somewhere? Of course we can. Like Nick Saban's most dominant Alabama teams were always favored.
Yeah.
More often than not, they lost a game somewhere to somebody because that is the grind of the SEC. And you may be a little bit off one week while the other guy's on, and that's just what happens. So we've always said we think there's a decent chance Georgia drops a game somewhere, even if it's favored in every one. But I just don't. I think to me it's unlikely that you see a change in perception of the teams to that point to where Tennessee's a favorite going to Athens.
Yep, that's a good point. All right, Chris, what's another scenario?
I think I'm going to give you. Let's go DJ Lagway. Does DJ Lagway, is it likely or unlikely he leads Florida in passing yards by the end of the season?
I'm going to go likely because I think he's going to be a primary guy. Yeah. I think we're going to see as long as Billy Napier, I think, is there, we're going to see a 2-quarterback system. And I think DJ Lagway is going to be the guy that they go to when they need long yardage situations. To me, he's got to play Lagway unless something just drastic happens when he's in the ball game. I think he's got to play him when Graham Mertz comes back. So I'll go likely. I think we're going to see a lot of Lagway.
Have they named a starter for Saturday yet officially?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think the speculation is he's going to go back to Mertz, which makes it more interesting if that's what they do.
Yeah. It'll be interesting, though. My next scenario is actually a quarterback scenario as well. Hank Brown becomes the starter for the Auburn Tigers.
Ooh,
likely or unlikely.
Is he their backup right now still?
Yes.
Because I think there was some question. Yeah, I think so because Hugh Freeze is in blame everybody mode right now. And I think you at some point, if he sticks with the same guy and it doesn't go well, then it's harder to do that. Okay, you put another guy in there. Maybe you can go to your booster, say, hey, we need more NIL for another quarterback. That's what I don't know how he'll process it. But to me, boy, and let me look at the schedule too. You've got New Mexico this week that they should be able to move the ball against New Mexico. New Mexico's maybe got the worst defense in the country. So maybe he's safe for another week. Arkansas next week, that's in Jordan-Hare. That's not going to be easy. But boy, after that, Oklahoma, at Georgia, at Missouri, and for good measure at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Which for all Kentucky's issues, their defense is pretty good. I just don't know that Peyton Thorne survives that gauntlet of a schedule with the background of noise already forming.
Yeah, I was told by an Auburn insider this morning, we're doing this on Wednesday, that we will see a significant amount of Hank Brown this Saturday against New Mexico to see where he's at. And they also said they could see Hank Brown getting a lot of playing time unless something major happens where he comes in and is throwing picks left and right. And then in the time Peyton Thorne's in there, he's just throwing it all over the yard and they're scoring touchdowns like they did against A&M. But I am told that we will see Hank Brown a significant amount, most likely on Saturday against New Mexico. So I think they're putting him in a situation where I think he could be, and I think they need to do something to have success, to find some consistency in the quarterback position. If that's changing it, it's changing it. That's just how it is. But they've got to do something to win some games, or it could be a long year for Auburn.
Well, and here's another thing. At what point does this come back on the coaching staff for development? Because Peyton Thorne was a better player 2 or 3 years ago at Michigan State. Now, I think one of those years was the Mel Tucker year where they really hit it hot and won a bunch of games, and maybe everything just clicked that year. But I think you've got a problem when you've got a veteran quarterback in this league, and he's worse than he was markedly from when you started coaching him. When you're an offensive guru like Hugh Freeze, that is not a problem you want to have.
Yeah, that is very true. And so that is some likely or unlikely here on the SEC Football Hour. And that will do it for this episode. Appreciate you for hanging out with us. And hey, if you have not subscribed to our channel yet and you liked what you saw, hit that subscribe button. You can also like this video, send us a comment as well. And if you would be interested in advertising and sponsoring the SEC Football Hour, you can email caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. That is caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. And you can send an email and we can start those conversations. But we do this show in conjunction with all the rest of the videos we do. That's prediction videos, ranking, reaction. It's all right here on Southeastern 16. So hit the subscribe button. We will talk to you again very soon. Enjoy the weekend of SEC football, and we'll talk to you again very soon. This is Southeastern 16 presented by BetOnline.